You're in a barracks building that maybe it's got mold on the ceiling and it's not the nicest place to be. And in some cases, it has a little bit more feeling of being like in prison because you have a bunch of young men, highly competitive, in some cases aggressive, and away from home for the first time in a lot of cases.
The world is obsessed with fast-track success. It's easy to think that people become successful overnight. But let's face it, more often than not, what we see on social media is total BS. I'm here to look past the perception of perfect success and focus on life's detours, perceived mistakes, and even wrong choices, and understand the real road traveled up the career ladder. After all, we're all effing up. Tyler Schmoker is a retired Army Combat Arms Senior Non-Commissioned Officer, former paramilitary advisor, and strategic projects consultant to Fortune 500 companies. Tyler has worked in corporate security, strategy, project and program management, as well as tech. Tyler is an avid Alpine climber and endurance athlete. He is also the founder and principal at Winsley LLC, a high-performance coaching, consulting, and advisory services firm. When the going gets tough, the tough choose Winsley. Tyler, thank you so much for being on the Ep8 podcast. I'm excited to chat with you today.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So why don't we first start by you informing the audience on what you're up to in terms of your career right now.
I started the consultancy firm Winsley, the world famous, although nobody knows about it yet. So this is my first leap into solopreneurship and essentially taking all the skill sets from the last couple of decades of working in different capacities in the military, executive capacities, et cetera. And now applying that, a lot of it's to the same Rolodex of clients, but now I'm sending out the bills and keeping the P&L myself and marketing the business myself.
I'd like to go back to your childhood. Are there specific experiences or themes that you can point to that ties into your career?
Yeah, my childhood was perfect. I had every opportunity handed to me. I'm joking. Who doesn't have some sort of trauma? I would say overall, I had a pretty good childhood. It was fairly unique. So I grew up in North Dakota where not a lot of people grow up or live. And I grew up in a very rural part, even by North Dakota standards. Grew up poor. Over time, it got better and we weren't quite as poor. I started working very early and worked hard, especially during the summer, and really got a good context to even project management and program management and setting priorities and doing those types of things before I even really knew what it was. And of course, I'm out there working with my dad, my uncle, and friends who are working with their dads. You could be a 10, 12-year-old kid and you're going out to work in the field all day and you might get in a tractor and not see anyone, totally self-starting and self-directed. So I would say that that really guided my career. And then on top of that, just for community and working community. So got accustomed to deprivation pretty early in life. And I would say I didn't really go without necessarily, but there's a lot of stuff that we just didn't have that as I got older and in retrospect, we didn't really have a lot and a lot of my clothes weren't new and those types of things. I always took that with me into different professional settings, whether it was in the military or post-military in the corporate world. And we don't have this thing that we used to have, or this situation's really tough, or we have a client that's difficult to deal with or whatever. So it's always one of those things that I keep in the back of my mind that I've been in worse situations than this. Just give it a week to settle. You get used to your environment and then it just doesn't really matter. So why burn the extra calories obsessing over something that's a little bit difficult that you can deal with and just carry on with the principal effort? I think a lot of people burn a lot of extra calories and even mental and emotional anguish on things that it feels like it's super important, but in the big scheme of things, it's detracting from the principal effort. So focus on getting to the principal effort and doing what you need to do at that objective. And it solves a lot of those problems that are really non-problems. It's just part of the process, right?
Was education a point of conflict as it related to working on the land or maintaining whatever your family was upholding at the time? Or was there a pretty clear separation that both would be taken care of?
So there was definitely an expectation for both.
Mm.
I'm the first person in my family to get a bachelor's degree. One of those American success stories, the first to get a degree, and everyone's so proud, and then you get a corporate job. So I would say, in a way, I was that black sheep that moved from like agricultural or industrial and like trade type of work into academia. But I
Mm.
would say early on when I was a little kid, I was bad. I was the kid that was looking out the window when I was supposed to be paying attention to the teacher. And so school was a little bit tougher for me when I was younger, due
Mm.
to inattention and maybe some emotional maturity as well. But then I started to buckle down when I got into the latter half of like middle school and into high school, and ended up graduating on the upper half of my class and testing well going into the army. And then some of it came along later where I didn't think I was ever going to pursue degrees. Like, I was coming out of working class North Dakota and off of the farm. I'd go into the army. Maybe I'd get out, get some sort of a trade job that paid well or whatever, and be a foreman someday. And then I ended up getting urged to go to school and or college. And this actually works for me surprisingly. And
Mhm.
I like to write and I like to do research and those types of things. A merging of two separate worlds between, I'm very blue collar working class at heart. And
Yeah.
I've managed to delve into different forms of academia. So I'd like to think I'm a little bit of a sleeper where I can pivot into different domains
Mm.
that maybe other people can't because they didn't have both of those experiences that were
Mhm.
in stark contrast.
Mm. Did you have a desire to get out of Dodge as a teenager?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think most did. When you, I
Well,
shouldn't
most
say
have the
that, but
idea, but do most really, truly want to carry it through?
with with rural communities in particular, I think that comes up where it's you look around and that there's a set career trajectory if you stay, and you don't know what's really out there. And in my case, I'd mentioned that we didn't have a ton of extra money, so a vacation to us was like going camping for the weekend.
Mhm.
Like, I'd only been out of state a handful of times and never left the country, so it wasn't like we had the big vacation when I was growing up or went anywhere. And even some of my friends had that where maybe they went overseas or they went to Disney World. I didn't have a lot of that. I'd never really seen the world. I knew what I knew about where I was. And so, yeah, there was the urge to get out of there. And like a lot of people, when you don't have a lot of means, like the military's kind of an option to do that.
Mm. So is that what you had planned for a while, or at what
Mm.
point did you commit to thinking that's gonna be what I pursue?
Yeah, so my dad was in the army and
Mm.
my grandfather was, and both of them had served in conflicts of Vietnam and Korea respectively, and some other uncles and things that had served as well. So it was always in the back of my mind.
Mm.
I would say that we were semi-patriotic, not overly, but not non-patriotic either, just in the sense that we were in it with the farm. So a lot of other stuff just didn't matter as much because that was really consuming. So that was just the mindset of the community. It's what's the spring going to be like? What's the crop going to be like? Everyone's working hard and you're just trying to get by and do a little bit better every year. But there was that military component to my family history. And so I hear the stories every now and then. And I always knew that it was something I probably wanted to try and do. And then it's those things that pass, but then I got into high school and I didn't feel like I was mature enough to go to college and I didn't really have an interest in it. And I also knew I didn't just want to work on the farm. I wanted to see what was out there. And
Mm.
so it wasn't like on a whim, and I joined pre 9/11, not long before 9/11, but pre
Yeah.
9/11. So it wasn't necessarily like the cry to action after 9/11 happened. It was just, this is something I can do, and then we'll see what happens next. So
Mm.
that's what I did. I was in basic training, I think 5 days after I graduated from high school, and
Oh, wow.
yeah, so it was quick.
Why so quick?
Just because I think that the recruiters at the because I'd signed up before I was out of high school. It's a program that they called delayed entry, which it's a way for recruiters to book their numbers to
Mm.
meet quota for a month, but there's some cool benefits of that as well. Like, you get a little bit of accrued time that goes towards retirement for those 4 or 5 months. So there's some pay scale stuff that's associated with it. And so I was signed up maybe 3, 4 months before, and it just so happened that immediate basic training class that kicks off like right after most high schools are graduating is not the one that everyone wants to go to. Everyone wants to have their summer and they want to go on
Yeah.
the senior trips and they want to do all these other
Sure.
things. And They said, "Hey, we want you to ship on this date." Okay.
So where was basic training for you?
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri,
Mm.
Ozarks Hill Country, to where very hot in the summer. I won't say like brutally hot like the Gulf Coast, but
Wet
very hot, very
from
humid.
a
And then,
humidity
yeah,
experience. Yeah.
yeah. And then, but still mid south enough that you get the frost and you get some snow and stuff in
Mm.
the winter times.
What learning curves did you experience as you entered your experience with the Army?
Emotional maturity was a big one for me. I was mature in the sense that I was very structured, very self motivated, driven, those types of things. But at the same time, I would say that a shock for me because I come from a small community where I know everyone's family,
Mm.
not very diverse at all. And I didn't have experience with like urban settings or different cultures or anything like that. And of course, in the army, you get thrown into a melting pot and
Okay.
and the reality is you get a lot of poor kids from urban areas, like inner city urban areas, and you get a lot of poor kids that are from outside of those areas in the poor rural communities. And
Mm.
yeah, there are all sorts of people that join the military, but there's a higher presence of those types of people. So you have a lot of people that just don't have very much. The military is tasked with that, trying to build a culture. So what they do then is they basically reprogram. It's a little bit different than like a corporate setting where you're trying to convince people into it. In that cor in that corporation, they're basically saying, this is the doctrine, these are the strategies, these are the tactics, this is how we do it. You're assigned to this cog in our wheel. But what are your relationships like when you're not on duty? Or like how are you getting along with people? Now you're in a barracks building that maybe it's got mold on the ceiling and it's not the nicest place to be. And in some cases, it has a little bit more feeling of being like in prison because you have a bunch of young men,
Mm.
highly competitive, in some cases aggressive, and people that are away from home for the first time in a lot of cases and trying to navigate and make that work. So you really have to up your game as far as getting along to going along and figuring out where you can assert yourself versus where you just go around the periphery. And so in that sense, it was very political, I would say, in a different kind of a sense, just living and existing because you're on a military base, you're with a unit, you have a high operational tempo where you're having to do a hard job, and then you're in tough living conditions with a lot of people that are really different from you. So it took me a while to adjust to that. And then eventually, with help of some good leaders, it started to click and I was off to the races.
Mm. Was that an isolating existence at the start?
I would say it's a weird type of isolation
Mm.
because you're never really alone. Like when you're in the army, you don't get much alone time ever to
Yeah.
sit and reflect and go for the nice walk because one, especially when you're pretty junior, and in training in particular, but every minute of your day is spoken for. You have blocks of times that are spoken for certain things, and there are certain tasks that you have to perform, conditions that you have to perform those tasks to, and then standards to meet the expectation for those staff or for those requirements. So you're just going through iterations all day, even to where on our training schedules, you would have 11 o'clock at night to 04 is sleep time.
Mm.
And then you are getting up. So it's all programmed. So it's isolating in the sense that you're being put into a system that is foreign to anyone who's never been in it before. And at the same time, you're on full display in your isolation because you're always with a bunch of other people,
Yeah.
going through this and trying to figure it out. And then again, imagine that you just have a lot of really young people now who are thrown into these complex situations. So you're figuring out social dynamics as well as the requirements of the mission at hand to sort that out.
I've talked to people in the varying branches, but something that just came to mind that I've really never sought to understand, and this is very juvenile, so bear with me. What does someone with a nervous stomach do? Right? Like someone who has to face something they've never faced and their stomach drops out and they need to run to the bathroom. What happens for that individual? Like, do they go in their pants? Are they able to go run to the bathroom? Because if you're saying every minute is spoken for, what happens with people who are struggling in that way?
All of the above. There's probably some going in your pants. There's probably some being able to sneak away. There's probably some cases where you'll get excused. It really just depends what's going on. And of course, like if you're marching and someone's going to have an issue, or if you're out on a organized, like a formation run or whatever, and people are having to run off, within reason, it's not a sergeant or an officer running the formation is going to be, so you get back in here and keep running until you go all over yourself. But at the same time, there's probably going to be a little bit of like public reprisal, like in the sense it's going to be hazing is a strong word for it. I won't say it's hazing, but definitely there's probably gonna be, like, some comedic commentary.
You're gonna be put on blast.
Yeah, and it'll be done in a comedic way. Like, I would say that some of the best officers and non-commissioned officers that I worked with were able to do it in a way where you got the point of it's, "Why didn't you go before we left? You knew we were running 10 miles," or
Mhm.
whatever the case may be, but adding, like, some sort of a comedic spin so everyone knows that you're out of compliance. Peer pressure is sometimes the best pressure to try and take care of each other and plan before the event, and at the same time, it also added levity to the situation. So we can't just let this pass, but we'll have fun with it, you know, go over there, do what you gotta do, and then you better catch up, and you better be back here in 5 minutes.
Fascinating. Do you have an experience, not necessarily related to going to the bathroom, anything where you can think where you were falling out of line and you were called out in that way?
We had a formation in the morning, everyone comes down, and they're in formation, and some kid's got his uniform on wrong or whatever. He's got, like,
Oh.
his button shifted or something, so it's you can tell at the top where his collar is
Yeah,
off,
yeah,
but
yeah.
and so the drill sergeant's kind of up chewing him out, and it's attention to detail, "Why is your uniform not on?" And it's one of those things that they focus on that attention to detail with something as trivial as, "Okay, I'll rebutton and it's no problem." But what if that's like a weapon system? Or what if that's calling for fire with a location
Yeah.
where you might be dropping ordnance? So all of those things where it's some of the things that are like I was talking about with the run where it's we have to stay on people and rib people with the things that are fairly trivial and not a big deal, but it's all about conditioning people to be on point when things are a big deal. So that's the point. But anyway, this kid's blouse was messed up and the drill instructor's chewing him out. And then he stops and he said, "Did you brush your teeth this morning?" Because he's like eye to eye with this guy. He's like, "Did you brush your teeth this morning?" He's like, "Yes, drill sergeant." "What'd you use? S paste?" And of course he used the word, but I remember that to this day. Like if there's a basic training story I ever tell, it's that one. And then the other one is like when you're in a mess hall and you get a couple hundred people in a company lined up to get chow. And like I was telling you before about how timelines are spoken for.
Yeah.
So they would do an order of chow by platoon. So a company is
Mm.
like 4 platoons of 20, 30 people, something like that. And the order of chow is 2, 3, 4, 1. So meaning second platoon went into the mess
Yep.
hall first. And why that's important is because everyone doesn't get a 30-minute lunch.
Yeah.
There's a 30-minute lunch. And so if you're the last
Rotating.
platoon so if
Yeah.
you're the last platoon, that means you probably have a 5-minute lunch, or if you're the last person in of the last like, you're probably eating off your tray, you might get to sit down and inhale some food, and then you're out of there. So what would happen is you'd have people, they'd have their tray from the main line, then they'd be up at the sal bar, and you went one direction only. So if you pass something and there's no going back.
Mm.
Once you get your stuff and you sit down, that's what you have. And you have people lollygagging. So we had a drill sergeant that would walk up behind people when they didn't know he was there, and I just yell. So you have people shaking their tray. You'd have water tipping over onto plates, but that's what you had then. But again, it was just all around like an extreme amplified version. Again, using some comedic relief. It's not funny if it's
Mm.
happening to you, but it's still, but
Yeah.
it adds levity as well. But so at the same time, it's artful in that it's using extreme discipline with also some comedy and levity, but it's making a point that it's like when it matters, we have to be on point. I think that military life is not really for everybody,
Sure.
but there's a real art to how it works to get groups of people to do some pretty extraordinary things. And the methods don't necessarily work in corporations where everyone's there at will,
Yeah.
but there's a method to the madness. And I've taken some of that with me.
To some degree, you wish it would in all circumstances, because we could all stand a lesson or opportunity to grow in that regard. I think we become complacent, entitled, use whatever word, and some of that. Just like what you were talking about, the importance of it's not about the button in the shirt. It's about the lesson from the button in the shirt. You've got to be ready in in an emergent situation to make a call, to listen to instruction, to whatever it is, and you have to be on point. And I feel like we could use a little bit more rigor sometimes. And when you look back at your full experience, you had you had several decades with the Army. Some of the hard experiences or challenges that you experienced during those decades.
Hmm. There were the practical matters of the Army really changed a lot in the time that I was in. Because again, I came in at the very tail end of, I guess, the Clinton years, and so still the post immediate post-Cold War military, a lot of older equipment, a lot of the doctrine was still training for the last war, and then a couple planes ran into some buildings, and everyone's world changed, and now if you're in the military or going into the military, crank that up to 11, right? So
Yeah.
you basically know then that at some point you're going to war. There's nothing easy about war. People can say that it is, and you can be better at it, but even when you're good at it, it's not easy. So I would say that's the biggest practical struggle, and the fact that it went on for so long. So you're always on deployments, you're always doing training, getting ready for deployments. And even if you're at home station, you're preparing for deployments. And then I would say outside of that, even though I'd gotten a lot better at first, I had challenges adapting to the military just because 'cause I'd had such a sheltered upbringing. Um, I'm a bit, I wouldn't say non-compliant, but I've always been pretty open about my uniqueness, and I have no problem just sharing what I feel or how I feel and operating a little bit differently. I know that, like, on LinkedIn where we met, I'm a little bit of an outlier with some of the stuff I do and how I present it, but that's not a social media thing. That's always been part of the
Mm.
brand. I was actually on another podcast one time, and one of the hosts asked me, because we were cutting up and joking around a lot.
Yeah.
She was trying to be polite about how she was asking the question. I know we're on here, we're joking around, you post satirical stuff. She's like, how does that all work with a career in the military? And I said, to be honest with you, the first half of it was a little bit rough. So I'm the guy who's doing push-ups a lot because
Oh,
a
wow.
a senior says something that's like a serious order, but it's funny how they said it. I'm the guy who's gonna call the wise and then I'm gonna get the 50 push-ups for
And
it,
they're
but
like, you're not supposed to be talking at all. Get down there.
suffice to say, my early career when I was junior in the Army was pretty rough.
Mhm.
Not rough in the sense that I was getting in trouble. I never really got into trouble, and I've always been a high performer in evolutions. I was in shape, I could shoot well, I could move, I could communicate, do all these things that we were measured for. So
Your
as a
your
result of
mouth got you into tricky situations?
oh, yeah, smart the same smart mouth
That
that
would be
gave
my arrow.
the same smart mouth that gave me problems in grade school, and I
Mm.
controlled a little bit in high
Mhm.
school, and then I got into the Army, and it started doing it again, so I had to work really hard so I could get promoted fast enough to where I couldn't be touched. So I promoted fairly quickly to senior level early in my career, and that gave me some latitude then to, 1, act the way that I wanna act, but 2, also start to develop culture within the teams that I dealt with.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
So
So there was some flexibility to do that.
oh, absolutely,
Oh, that's cool.
absolutely. Yeah.
So you became the one that was cracking the joke on the guy with the nervous stomach.
Yes, yes. You're not gonna make them stand out there forever, but at the same time, you're gonna get just the right amount of carefully crafted comedic ridicule so that everyone can laugh, including the guy that's running to the bathroom, and then they come back and we
Right.
carry on, right?
Well, and to your point, if every moment is spoken for of every day, that has to at some point get monotonous. So you're like, oh my gosh, at least we have our wits about us, right? We can make some sort of crack, all have a laugh, and that just broke up the day. You'd mentioned that you'd gone through several deployments during your time and whatnot. Several might be minimizing it. So I'm sorry if that is, but did emotion come with each new deployment? Was there feelings that you had to overcome or deal with?
Sure, because you're basically wholesale changing your whole life
Mm,
and going to you're not gonna live in the same place when you're on deployment. You don't know where you might live. You don't know how established or not established it's going to be. The only constant that you're going to have in a lot of those situations, and not even always, is some of the colleagues that you work with. Because for the most part, units deploy together.
oh,
So it's not like they just take one person from in the Army Reserves, that's a little bit different. There is a lot more of that piecemealing that happens that adds another level of stressor to it. But for the most part, you're going with your unit, but you're going to be away from your family. You know, if you have a spouse, you're going to be away from them, those types of things. And then I would say, so early on, there was definitely that. If I'm looking at a 12 or 13-month deployment, and you're a gal or guy or in your teens or your 20s, and you're trying to mentally compute, like, how do I deal with being away from my loved ones for 13 months or whatever, and maybe not. So that's a lot harder when you're younger
yeah,
than I think with age, some of it gets a little bit easier. And really, as I got older, it became less of an emotional burden and more of like it was an inconvenience. And that's
sure,
not
of
the right word for it. I signed up to serve. So I
course.
won't say it in that sense, but
But
just
you're a
as
human.
far yeah, the pre-deployment stressors were really, I need to make sure the bank accounts are set up or this or that, or if you're single and you have to end a lease on an apartment, or you're going to put stuff. There was just the logistical inconvenience of it.
Life admin.
And yeah, and really the most difficult part of deployments really was getting trained up, getting out the door, and then getting settled into your base camp and your area of operations. Because there's about a 2 to 3 month period where it's like a lot of training, you're moving around a lot, you're getting your stuff over there, you're out of routine, just getting set up. But then once you get into wherever your base of operations is, that's where you can start to develop those. In the Army, we call it battle rhythms again, but it's like your
Mm,
healthy habits for the day. I get up at 5 a.m., I go for my run. We've got work call, we've got these different meetings. We have these, you know, joint force partners that we meet every week or whatever, and you get into your routines to where you have
mhm,
dinner at a certain time, maybe you hit the gym or whatever, and then it gets a lot easier.
sure.
And that's where the months start to peel off, and before you know it, it's time to come home.
Mm,
So if I'm queued up for another deployment, I always just think about that. Just need to get through the first couple months and then it's all
yeah,
gravy. You get into your routines, you get into shape, you get sharpened up on your job skills and you
yeah.
carry on.
From a perspective of having never done this and outsider looking in, I would certainly struggle with this idea of lack of control, the unknown, right? Leading up to, okay, you find out where you're going to go or how long you're going to go, but then it's like, you just want to rip the band-aid off. Let's just get there. Let's just get in sync because you're just in this waiting period and it just feels, yeah, you feel unsettled. Like even as a person of like, I don't care for routine, then you're craving that routine because you just need a sense of control and comfort's probably not the right word, but, like, just knowing where you need to be and how it's gonna play out.
It's like going through a hiring process and then through orientation. It's
Mm,
like hiring process can suck, orientation can suck because you're hearing about all
your
these
first
things you're
90
supposed to be
days,
doing,
yeah.
and yeah, and you don't even have your computer yet, and then you don't have your sign on, but they expect you to do this stuff. But then
Yeah,
once you have your space, you have all your logins, you have your routines set up, you have your folders, and then it's just easy
mm,
peasy. So that's how I think about it. When you have those
yeah, that's a good
moments of
example.
significant change and chaos, it's like this too will pass. So just chill out, quit wasting calories on stuff that's not
Yeah,
that big of a deal. Focus on the principal effort, and it'll take care of the rest of the noise.
yeah. You seem really even keel. Is number 1, perception versus reality. Are you even keel? Number 2, is this how you've always been, or you feel like that it came out of your experience with the Army? Or both?
I think some of it is ingrained, but I think some of it's just a lot of repetitions that
Mm,
I talk about this quite a bit with like clients as well. It's we have a situation called OB overcome by events, and everyone's got their situations where they get overcome by events. So what I talk about with clients too is around continually developing your capacity for known problems as well as likely contingencies, right? Like
mm,
you can't plan for everything and you can't train for everything. your principal effort and real requirements that you have right now, whether it's in your job or in your home or in your life or whatever. And then you have these higher probability scenarios that on your worst day, this might be why it is. If you're in a data center, power outage might be your worst day. So how do you plan for that? So everyone's got a plan for their contingencies. Maybe for someone in corporate HR, maybe it's like a hostile termination. Like those are the days where you're having to bring in outside people. Do you need security? Do you need all these other things? How are you notifying stakeholders while still using discretion? All of that different type of stuff. So I focus on getting that vector for OBE, get it down as small as you can get it. So over the last 20 years of dealing with a lot of hard stuff in a corporate environment, as well as like a military and an operational environment, I've just gotten to a point where my OBE is a lot smaller. Not to say that I can't get overwhelmed, because I'm a human and I absolutely can, and I do on occasion, but it takes a lot more to get my temperature needle up these days.
Is there anything noteworthy from starting your educational path and any challenges and that you feel like is worth talking about?
Biggest challenge was that it took a long time because I was overlapping it with the military. I'd done my first enlistment as active duty, so it was the regular army, full-time, no questions asked. And then after that, I transitioned into the National Guard. So continued service, National Guard, and
Mhm.
subsequently reserves up until I retired at like right around the 21-year mark. So I was balancing still being in the National Guard, doing training, doing that type of stuff. I was working college kid jobs on top of that. And then you're getting deployed and with the National Guard, like the dirty little secret is you get deployed by the governor every time it storms and stuff happens. So if you have a tornado go through an area or hurricanes or
Sure.
whatever, if you're getting mobilized for that, and then on top of that, you have the federal government, because this is post 9/11, they're calling up units too, and then you're getting mobilized on different orders, and you're basically going and supporting the active efforts, overseas contingencies, Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever. And yeah, it took me about 10 years to get through undergrad and grad school. I think 6 years and 4 years respectively, where it should have taken probably about 3 years left in or less in
Mm.
totality. So I would say that was the biggest challenge with education, is just that you get deployed and sometimes it was short notice, and maybe it was only a month, but it would ruin a semester. So there was a lot of those types
Yeah.
of
Would you have
challenges.
to repeat courses? Oh,
It all depends. So I was fortunate, and I had strategically done it with my undergrad for sure. When I got off active duty, I'd been stationed in Louisiana, and there was a D2 school there that had a campus like outside of Fort Polk. It's like I was familiar with the area. So I went there knowing it was going to be fairly military friendly, like they're hip to the program. So
mm,
whereas if it was a school in a major city, I might be the only person asking for these types of accommodations. So it all
sure.
just really depends. If we're a week or 2 into a semester and so I'm getting deployed, it's not like they're gonna let me take finals early. So stuff like that is a wash. But
Mm.
I think I've had situations where I was maybe 2 weeks out from a semester and I was able to take finals early or defer finals until I got back 6 months later or whatever.
Mm.
So it's challenging.
What came after this period of education when you weren't being deployed? What was your first job, if you will, outside of that realm?
I got my undergrad in 2009. The economy was in the gutter, right?
Mhm.
The housing market had
Oh,
blown everything up, and yeah. And so here I am, a guy with my newly minted degree that's going to open all these doors for me. And I have a resume that's chock full of military experience, and I'm still using the acronyms. And if I was lucky enough to get an interview, I wasn't making it past the first round because I didn't know. And the reality is there weren't as many resources available. Like now you can get on the socials and you have people who specialize in helping tailor resumes and putting your best foot forward as a green suitor going into an interview and not jargoning them to death with military lingo. A lot of that stuff didn't exist then. And I got my undergrad, and I'd been on some deployments where I'd seen the private sector functioning in military roles. And I'm like, "Well, that's pretty interesting. Right." And so, as a person who was in the National Guard and going to school and going on to grad school, I was able to do a bunch of different things and overlap a lot of different stuff. So when people look at my experience, they're like, you were in for 20 years, but how'd you do this and that?
Mm.
It's look closely, it's certainly disclosed. I was a National Guard person and I was a reservist, but I worked for corporations and did this other stuff. And it was really a matter of I didn't embed too deep in any one thing, so I could try a lot of different things. I always quote Tim Ferriss on being a professional dilettante and a professional
Mm.
dabbler, and I very much associate with those things as well. I didn't really get to the pinnacle of anything, whether in the military or the civilian world, but I blended a lot of things together that brought me holistic experience. So I went into paramilitary work, then I landed a contract. So I was taking periods of time where I was basically had an excused absence from the National Guard, and they weren't deployed at the time, and I was going to war. And then they have some training stuff. "Well, I'm coming back. Now I'm with the National Guard units." I was doing all of the same stuff on a full-time basis. It's just a matter of, was I wearing a uniform or was I wearing civilian clothes and who was sending me a check when I was
Oh,
doing it,
wow.
right?
Was that confusing for you?
It was fascinating for me. I think it was
Mhm.
confusing for my command.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of people in the military that it was confusing for, so you have to remember that this was all around the time when if you remember the KBR and the Dick Cheney connection and all these single source contracts and spending, and then, and maybe not everyone's heard, but some people heard of the company Blackwater that was a prominent paramilitary company. And so there were some of these misconceptions, I think, and maybe sometimes rightfully so that came along with this. But I think it was a really interesting time in that it showed what was possible in terms of if we have to go to war, what is a privatized war? I was a little bit more senior in the military then, and I was also a lot more emotionally mature and developed by that point. So I was able to articulate that a little bit better than someone who was junior trying to pull that off, and maybe they couldn't have. But I think also, too, the reason I was given being excused absences from normal training activities with the National Guard is because they knew that I knew what I was doing, and they knew that in a way it benefited unit readiness because, yeah, maybe I missed 6 or 8 months of 1 weekend a month drills, but I was in Afghanistan. I was
Mm.
operating, right? So that was the difference. But then you have purists too who'd say things like, "You're just doing it for money and you're a sellout," or whatever else, and you should be focusing on your military career. And it's in a way, I started learning the business of defense and then eventually the business of security while I was still a military member. A lot of military people, they do an active duty career, whether it's in the Army or the Navy or the Marines or Air Force or whatever. And then they have a lot of trouble with transition. Whereas I overlapped my transition really early
Mm.
on between active duty, then reserves, but going to college, then doing paramilitary stuff, which lended itself into me getting jobs in like commercial and corporate security.
But to that person's judgmental comment, it's your prerogative. You can do whatever you want. It's your life.
I ended up going on a contract that took me away for about 10 months. And I won't say it wasn't career ending for me, but it definitely hurt me in that organization where maybe you'll be in one of these state roles that's highly esteemed or whatever, but instead you went off and you're out being a privateer. And so among some in that organization, it was seen as you decided to go and do it for the money instead of doing it for your country. And that wasn't really the case. It's a
Ooh.
matter of, we're not deployed right now. If we were, this wouldn't even be a discussion, but we're not. And the few $100 a month that I get off a 2-day a month drill isn't cutting it. I need to make some money.
Yeah.
And so I ended up foregoing some of those other things to do that. So as a result, I probably should have retired as like an E9 at the top of the enlisted ranks, but I retired as an E8 because I made some of those decisions about what I wanted to do commercially within that
Mm.
same realm. But at the same time, post-military career, it enabled me to get through a lot of doors that other people don't, to where I've been more successful at senior levels within private companies than a lot of folks who maybe would have been more senior in the Army and then straight transition and got to like middle management roles.
I'm curious how all this played into your personal life. Were you able to maintain friendships, see family? Was that an option? Was there time for that?
really. I would say I'm definitely a bit nomadic in that regard. And
Mm.
for a lot of years, I would joke that I could pack up my whole life into the back of a truck and be gone tomorrow. And
Mm.
the other one was I would joke that my parents don't usually know what continent I'm on at any given time. And some of that's true because people just get into their patterns and same routines. And at that point, even if I go back home to North Dakota now, which I do occasionally, but my frame of reference is so foreign to a lot of the people that I grew up with that
Yeah.
I either go one of two defaults. I just talk more about what they have going on and ask them a lot more questions, or I just don't go around because it's too hard to explain it in a
Yeah.
lot of cases. And you don't even know if people really cares. And I know some people are interested or whatever, but it's just whatever. Just find your people. It's again, it's all about return on effort investment. Find your tribe where you have to burn less calories
Mm.
and be happy and be one with them and you guys have the same principal effort, right?
Has it been challenging to develop relationships outside of the sphere of the armed forces?
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Between the armed forces and I would say even leading into private military companies and then corporate or commercial security companies, like they're separate, but they're all kind of feeders. So you have a few weirdos like me who cross over and cross over quite a bit. And then
Mm.
you have you people who make one or two moves. But yeah, it's definitely challenging. And I would say that for about 10 years of my career, I didn't do a very good job of networking. I came from like a military and paramilitary mindset of it's a meritocracy and the work will speak for itself. And for a long time, it absolutely did. I hit targets. I was rewarded for that. And then you start to reach those director, VP, senior VP levels when that's not enough anymore.
Mm.
And I was faced with the reality that, oh, I didn't meet as many of the people as I should have been meeting when I should have been meeting them, and instead I was doing the work and griping about the people that were going out and networking instead of working, and then I'm like, "Well, I enabled them and I disabled myself," which is where I made a decision to really put my networking into overdrive, and now you have what you see here on LinkedIn as well, where I went from a 0
You
to again,
double down.
I cranked it up to 11, and now everyone in my industry knows who I am, whether they want to or not, and I'm pretty recognizable. It's one of those situations of understanding that I overlooked something that I shouldn't have overlooked,
Yeah.
and it was going to start being a limiting factor for me.
It sounds like you're very pragmatic, programmatic. You set your mind to something. You talk about the principles that you learned as you entered the army and you're relating it to this experience. Did you have imposter syndrome as you started that, or do you experience that at all even now?
Who doesn't? I
Mm.
have imposter syndrome right now. Like, am I gonna say am I gonna say something wrong? Is it not gonna sound right? I think everyone has that a little bit. But
Hmm.
again, similarly to like what we talked about with your capacity to deal with adversity and hardship and
Yeah.
getting that overcome by events vector really slim, so that not a lot phases you.
Yeah.
I would say it's the same thing that, yeah, of course, there's always sizing up period, and people do worry about how other people perceive them, even if they
Of
say they
course.
don't, because we're all social creatures. Some of us care less than others, but we all
Some of
care
us are
somewhat.
better at hiding it than others.
Yeah,
From
I
my
would say that.
vantage point, you're really good at hiding.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
you've got yourself real buttoned up. You are articulate. If you're having imposter syndrome, no one knows it. And so
Well, I
I think
appreciate that.
some people have perfected the experience for themselves, but obviously you don't feel like that. But perception versus reality.
I look at my balance sheet, and if it's an off month, I'm like, "Oh, no, was this a bad idea?" And then you land a client, and it's, "Okay, now I'm back on the high, and this will help me. I have a retainer. This floats things, and it's okay."
Mm.
So, yeah, I have imposter syndrome like everyone else. I lay project management on top of everything.
Yeah, that's
So
a fantastic lesson to learn. And I think where a lot of us in the deep end, we forget that you can layer things like that on to help you through it. And then to your point, you burn calories just obsessing over, oh, what are we going to do? Stop floundering, swim, just go.
Yeah.
And so what? You have to doggy style it. You don't need to like have perfect form. Just get out of the pool. Okay. I'm going a little deep on the pool analogy. See what I just did there? Okay. What other career experiences do you feel like we should touch on where you can share some hard learned lessons?
So I
Or y-
was with a firm for 9 years that there's a good chance I would have stayed there for the rest of my career. It was good career opportunities, large companies, there was interesting work, those types of things. They ended up getting acquired and I was offered a role and I just didn't like the flavor of what had come in
Mhm.
and not a ding on the company that came in. It just was what it was. It wasn't a fit for me. But in the course of that 9 years, I was able to do some things that some of my peers weren't. As one, I was able to climb the ranks a little faster because, again, I was a bit more pragmatic and I didn't get stuck in the dogma of how we had to do it. I just looked at the problems that faced a department and scaled those. But along that course, you're going to get a lot of ridicule too. A lot of people want to be innovative and disruptive, but they don't really want to be innovative and disruptive.
Absolutely.
When they find out that being a disruptor usually means you're unpopular at a minimum, and in some cases, you're downright hated. And I know that hate's a strong word, and I try not to use it, and I try not to hate anyone ever because just life's too short, it burns too many calories. But there are going to be colleagues that you'll find that if you're really truly on the leading edge of things, and they call it the bleeding edge for a reason, if you're really changing things and moving things forward, you're going to have people that I always accepted it for what it was because I was more concerned about the principal effort than necessarily having people like me. And as a consequence, there are people that don't necessarily like me even to this day because I drove disruption in that organization that I was in and solved a lot of problems that hadn't been solved. So I was able to progress. And so in some cases, like, "Oh, this guy just got another promotion or whatever. It's no, I'm actually solving problems. And here are the measurable results. And that's why I'm getting these roles. And that's why you're still sitting in the same role you were 5 or 10 years ago, talking about how did this guy get promoted to where I was surpassing people that were older than me in some cases and been with the company a lot longer, but they were looking at problems through a lens that didn't allow them to see the problems. Rather, they were just seeing it as the way that we operate, as opposed to being like a detriment to the way that the organization produced.
But you're a human. What came up for you as you're feeling like, okay, I know the program, I know what I need to do, I want results, I need to do these things, but everyone around me, maybe I'm exaggerating, people around me are, they have a distaste for me as a human, not as an operator. How did that feel?
For a long time, I would burn unnecessary calories on proving people wrong.
Mm.
So I took a punk rock Rage Against the Machine approach. And I would say that as I've gotten older and one, maybe I'm a little bit more conservative with my calories and where I expend them, and I don't have quite as many to burn. I've taken that to showing people what right looks like instead, where it's like a more sustainable path to being an outlier, but in a way that's not necessarily Rage Against the Machine. And I think in doing so, it's made me a little bit better at being a change agent than I used to be. I've gotten better at being a bit more inclusive, or at least being a little bit better about articulating the why I want to do something and why it's important and why it brings a kind of applying the organizational change management, some of that pro side methodology, as opposed to we're going to do it this way because I'm smarter and it's right and you'll see. And maybe it is right, but then everyone hates me after the fact. So it's implementing those things in a way that's more inclusive.
I feel like you're answering the question based on everyone else and not answering the question based on you. You were talking about how you solved the problem so that they could see you. But how
Sure.
did it feel when these people are not believing in you, frustrated with you, not wanting your disruption? Was that triggering your emotions as a human?
It's a double-edged sword. Does everyone wanna be loved by everyone and be cheered? Of course. Maybe not always, but everyone wants some of that acknowledgement. At the same time, the opposition is fuel. I like fighting for things. If my career is any indication, so it's yes. Do I wanna be accepted and be talked about more often as someone who has a positive impact on an industry or an organization? Absolutely. And at the same time, I know that my success has come from fighting when people are complacent.
Mhm.
So it's you're playing to two masters, really.
When you think about your career in totality, what would you consider as the low point?
It probably it's on paper too, actually. It's one and the same. I would say getting my undergrad, 2009, the economy's garbage, and I'm unemployed and trying to find jobs and not even getting interviews. And so that was the low point. And then I ended up getting a six-figure job. It was doing paramilitary stuff at 29 years old. And so had that for a while and then ended up coming back home and trying to get quote unquote normal jobs. And so this was 2010-ish, maybe. Then you're working for 13.50 an hour. And you're in grad school close to done and you're working for 13.50 an hour and you have supervisors that don't have a resume like yours, but it was a matter of timing. And so that stuff's really hard. And again, like me in my 40s, I appreciate what it is and why people are at where they're at. Some of it's timing, but at the time, it's just is well, according to the meritocracy, I should be here. And yeah, but I just came in. It's not like they're going to flip us positions. That would be chaos as well.
Yeah. When you mention your formative years when you would expend more calories and get worked up over things that manifest for you physically, mentally.
Exhaustion and productivity. So again, probably double edged to the sword in a way. It can be emotionally taxing and physically taxing because I'm going to show you even harder now. I'm going to train even harder. I'm going to work even harder. I'm going to do
Mm,
all these things even harder than everyone else and think that I'm this rare specimen that can do it in perpetuity. When the reality is we all have to slow down and chill out at some point.
yeah.
But I got a lot done. Can only burn that furnace so hot for so long. I was a hard charging person. I met other people that are hard charging. Eventually, that's going to burn you down. So you
Well,
have
and
to
of
find
course
some
you
other
can do
stuff.
that in your 20s. Of course. And then you
Yeah.
graduate to your 40s and you're like, yeah, no, can't.
And I think that's where it starts to hit a lot of people. I think they get their early to mid 30s and they start realizing yeah, I've been crushing it, but I'm burning my furnace out. And I look at this pile of fuel that I have left, and I have to conserve some of this stuff and be a little bit smarter and in my decisions. So you figure out like, how do I maintain this heat without burning myself
We're
down?
not really taught any better, to be honest. We're taught go to the races as hard as you can and achieve everything you can as soon as you can. And with that mentality, you just feel like you're running the marathon and you have to win the marathon.
Yep.
And only one person wins the marathon, FYI. But it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you don't have great stats or it's not successful if you walk the marathon. It's just such a fallacy. And it's really unfortunate because if we were taught, yes, you can go hard charging, but this is the amount of fuel you have, and it has to survive the course of your career and your life. So try to think responsibly about how you use that fuel and when you use that fuel. I think we'd do a little bit better. I don't think we'd get it perfect because you have to learn and go through it. But yeah, we're not given much guidance there.
Some of it's a consequence. This is my unfounded theory, of course, but
Love it.
I think some of it's a consequence of American culture in
Hmm.
particular,
Sure.
in that relatively speaking, we're a pretty new society and a pretty new culture. And we're a pretty new governmental system, and capitalism's still really new, and all of those other things. So, for the first time, and I think really a lot of this was prompted by the pandemic, and then a lot of it within you and I are both in the LinkedIn sphere and see where some of this is starting to normalize more. And so you're probably going to have camps that are going to say people just don't want to work anymore and they just need to suck it up and work their tail off like my generation. It's like, well, people are working. They're just working differently, or maybe
Working
the job
responsibly.
or the job they have sucks because someone didn't retire. And there are a lot of different elements to it. But I think overall, I think American working culture in particular is starting to recognize that to where it's getting a little bit more normalized.
Mhm.
And if we look to Europe as an example, not to say that they have their systems down perfect either, they know how to chill out a little bit better. They
Sure.
know how to vacation a little bit better. They know how to recreate a little bit better. They know how to program family time and community time into
Mhm.
their working lives a little bit better than we do. And it's not because they're necessarily better than us or we don't know or our style's better. It's just they're an older, more mature society.
Mhm.
So I think that we are moving towards that. Because we were talking earlier about this, but it's what's the model of what looks like? And if you look at like a TV show from the 50s or 60s, the guy gets home from work, he drops his briefcase, he hangs up his hat and he sits down and his 50s wife hands him a scotch and she goes in and makes at the time that was normal. And now we look at it, that's a little preposterous. I know that there are going to be people that look at how we do it now and
Sure.
probably even like Europeans look at how Americans work culture.
Mhm.
Think are insane.
Insane.
Like,
Yeah.
no wonder they go out into the world and annoy everyone else because of the intensity that they operate at. And I think some of it's just we're still a country that we have our furnace stoked on high, still trying to prove something.
Yep.
When I think, we can start to influence things a little bit better if we just even it out a little bit and share what we have with the world.
Yeah. I think to your point, the pandemic was a paradigm shift that we needed as a society to all these issues were underlying in there before. It's not like they're brand new. We're just more
Yeah.
comfortable with talking about it, like mental health, burnout, wanting to work remotely, and asking for flexibility. We would just put up with shit forever because you felt like you had
Asking for
to.
more money,
Yes.
all of those things.
And so the pandemic gave us a shake and taught us a little bit about, oh, we can live our life a bit and use our voice a bit. And I think that's why we've seen a change on LinkedIn as well, being more expressive and not just all rainbows and sunshine. That definitely is where we tend to go as a society. But yeah, I'm always trying to find the silver linings of the pandemic. And I think that for me is probably the most visible and exciting
Oh,
outcome.
yeah, it was a huge disruptor, unintentionally,
Mhm.
but it was a huge disruptor and it opened up some vectors for people to try different stuff. You have entrepreneurship is booming. And at the same time, companies that people don't just want to work anymore. Some of them just don't want to work for you,
That's right.
especially when I can go get a no code website. I can get more hits off of a social media post than you get off your website. And I can go get Square and I can send out invoices pretty easily. It's democratized work in a way.
Mhm.
It's because I think I'd heard something the other day. I was listening to another podcast and they were saying that the amount of that's like half the amount of fortune or it was a revenue amount, but it's basically the amount of companies that are over X amount of revenue or like a billion in revenue or something like that are half that than what they were 20 or 30 years ago because of consolidation. I think we're going to
Wow.
continue to see that. But at the same time, you're going to see folks that are going to do something on their own and go
Yeah.
out there and whether they're consulting or creating or whatever. And it's really democratized work in a way. There are definitely some things that we can take from some of these more mature societies and countries and apply that to get us in the longer run. Maybe a little less processed food, a little bit more time to exercise, a little bit more community-based stuff, and we just need to find that spot.
As it relates to Winfrey, what keeps you up at night?
Balance sheet. To be quite honest with you, I'm not worried about the service or product offering. I know what my capabilities are. I'm doing some of the same work. Really, for me, the biggest part now is marketing, which I've developed a capacity to do that. But ultimately, you have to convert that. And that's where the comparison stuff comes in. You have people, oh, I did 7 figures this week or 7 figures this month. And I didn't necessarily do that. And I'm not yet, but I know it's going to be okay. And if it's not okay, then we'll call it a part to 3/4 time sabbatical for a year or 2 and having some fun, and then I'll go back to work.
If you could go back and talk to your sub 20-year-old self, what advice would you share?
Oh, man, probably to chill out sooner.
Mm.
I'd like to think I would get it.
Yeah, same. That resonates quite a bit. Just was on a tear to, I don't know, take over the world.
Same,
Ridiculous.
same thing. I used the analogy before. It's like you're trying to be in a punk rock band and not sell out, but it's in the middle of a coffee shop. No one's interested in it. Dude, just accept no one wants you to be punk rock right now. You can still like punk rock. You can still have it in your heart, but do what's selling at the moment then if you still feel it in 10 or 15 years and you want to open up your own shop and have a be coffee called coffee and punk rock, then you can do it. Right.
Okay, I have some rapid fire questions. How do you define success?
Am I doing what I want to be doing? And am I happy doing it?
Mm, what is happy?
There's $1 million question. It's a feeling. I know that's not a great answer, but it really is a feeling. It doesn't always have anything to do with money. It's just like your vibrations are right. Like you just have enough. You have enough in your relationships. You have enough as far as supporting yourself. That's where you find real happiness.
Is there a path not taken?
The one thing that I'm left wondering about, I feel like I should have made an attempt at trying out for a special operations role,
Mm,
whether it was like going to the Ranger Regiment or trying to go into special forces to get a Green Beret. There was probably a sweet spot of time where I was still physically at my peak, where I could have pulled it off physically. My skill sets were pretty good. And I'd also reached a point of emotional maturity. A lot of those folks end up going into the pipeline like pretty early into their military careers. And as I'd shared with you earlier, I had a lot of things going for me in terms of intellect and being pragmatic, but I wasn't as emotionally mature yet. I think if I would have tried to get into that pipeline at 20 or 21, I probably wouldn't have made it. Whereas maybe my sweet spot would have been about my mid 20s, where I started to have, I'd adapted to the military better. My emotions were on point. Plus, I was, capable, and I didn't do it. And it was just a matter of life had changed, and that's not the way that it worked out.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Effing Up. I'm your host, Deanne Reinert. If you enjoyed today's episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe on the platform you use to listen to podcasts. Share Effing Up with others, post about it on social media, and/or leave a rating and review. Until next time, count your perceived failures as part of your path to success. After all, we're all effing up.